Hello, this is your host, Christina from Savvy Radio. Thank you for joining us for our Heartbeat of the World video series, where we're bringing you some of the top experts around the globe to talk about some of the greatest challenges facing our country and the world. Our guest today is Dr. Marvin Marshall, America's leading expert in reducing stress that is so prevalent in work relationships, schools, and homes. He is the author of numerous books and today shares his wisdom on how we can all reduce stress in our lives. Find out more at withoutstress.com. Hi, Marv. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio for our Heartbeat of the World video series. I'm so grateful you could join us. You're going to be talking today about one of this very important topic that we've had on our show before, but we've not quite had a doctor on to talk about it, and it's quite important. Some of the things that cause some of the greatest illnesses in our lives, from cancer to diabetes and all the other assorted diseases, is stress. Starts with stress, and you've written a wonderful book, Live Without Stress. What led you to writing and focusing on stress in particular? I'm curious about that.
Well, I started off primarily an educator, although I have spent time in business and have a master's in business administration. I returned to the classroom after 24 years as a teacher on all levels, elementary principal, secondary principal, both middle school and high school principal, and director of education. After being out of the classroom for 24 years, I wanted to spend my last few years in the profession and doing what I enjoy most, which is classroom teaching. And so I discovered so many things that teachers are doing that are unproductive, and really counterproductive, and they don't even realize it. Wow. I can go into this later on, and parents do the same thing. At any rate, and so I decided that rather than aiming at obedience, I want to empower the young people. The vast majority of the teachers do not realize that they are in the relationship business and in the motivational business. And so I developed a program which is now used around the world. And so I finally decided, well, I should write this book. And the book is entitled Discipline Without Stress: How Parents and Teachers Promote Responsibility to Learning. As far as I can determine, it is the only program around. It's an actual program where the adult always stays in control without using coercion. And there's one chapter in the book on parenting, and a number of teachers says, Marv, would you please write a book just on parenting? Yeah. And so my parenting book is entitled Parenting Without Stress: How to Raise Responsible Kids While Keeping a Life of Your Own. And then I decided my principles are really universal, and stress is consuming so many people's lives in a negative way. Why didn't I write a book on stress? So my newest book is entitled Live Without Stress: How to Enjoy the Journey. And the whole idea is basically learn how to control your mind. If you master your mind, your stress will be significantly reduced. And the 29 chapters in the book give specific suggestions in various situations on how to be in control, never feel that you are a victim, and empower yourself to reduce your own stress.
And it's interesting because I would gather that if you're a stressed out mom, part of it's what's going on inside of you, not so much the external. I've seen parents screaming at their kids, losing their mind because of all the stuff on their plate, from having to pay the rent, to go to work and get the kids off to school. And the same goes for the teachers with 30 or odd more kids in the classroom. It's really high stress. And what I took away from your book that I thought was fascinating is I never quite thought about how our perspective really shapes the amount of stress we have in our lives. Share that with us, because I never thought about how I would look at something on the outside in my life, how that could contribute to the stress in my life.
Well, it's all basically about being aware of your choices. We're making choices all the time. Choice ends when life ends. And when you become conscious of the choices that you're making and that you have the option, regardless of the situation that you cannot change, regardless of any stimulation that you get, or regardless of any urge, you never have to be a victim, because you always have the power to choose your response in any situation. And when you start to think of how you can use your brain to redirect negative thoughts, you're in a whole different ballgame.
That's interesting. We had a guest a couple of years ago who got severely burned all over his body, 80%. The person next to him was 85% burned. They were both in the burn ward, but he kept saying, I'm going to beat this. God's going to help me through this. Everything, I'm going to get back on top. And he recovered a lot quicker than the guy next to him who ultimately died. And he really feels it was the power of his mind that he really kept positive and focused on the final outcome he wanted, instead of focusing on where he is right now.
There's no doubt about it. And you hit the key word. The very first principle I practice, which are universal, is positivity. Henry Ford stated it beautifully. You think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. Either way, you are right. Yeah. So always talk to yourself in an empowering way. The fact of the matter is that people do better when they feel good. People don't do good when they feel bad. So you not only talk to other people if you want to improve your relationships and effectiveness, you not only talk to them in an empowering way, which is quite easy, you also talk to yourself that way. The key is to be kind to yourself. If you're not kind to yourself, chances are you're not going to be kind to others, and you're going to operate in a negative aura, which is totally counterproductive to yourself and with other people. So that's the very first principle to practice. Be positive.
Yeah. And what I remember, Marv, is many years ago, I was working in a position I didn't quite like. I felt really a lot of drudgery, and I was talking negatively to myself, but I came in, I felt good meeting up with the girls and having this kind of water cooler negative talk about, oh, this and that, and I hate this and we hate that. And we all felt good because we're all commiserating together. When I started to, a couple of years ago, when I got on track finding my greatest passion, which we're doing here right now, I realized, this was not productive to my health and to my well-being. And I actually stopped going to the water cooler. I started to think about what am I thinking every day? Why am I thinking this? And I talked to that a little bit. I think that's hard when you start hanging out with a group of people that really likes commiserating with each other. You kind of keep each other stuck.
Well, it's interesting because what you have done is you've stopped being fed by external approaches, external things that people talk about. I think that one of the major contributions that I have given to society is what I refer to as the hierarchy of social development. And the most important thing about it is having people understand the difference between internal and external motivation. Once, especially young people, once you can articulate you're doing something to please somebody else, to get a reward, to please somebody else, rather than doing it because it's the right thing to do, you're in a whole different ballgame. Can I share a quick story about this?
Absolutely, go for it.
Person went to her car after shopping at the market and realized that she had a lime in her hand that she had not paid for. She didn't no way for 10 cents that she wanted to walk back to the cashier, but she knew the levels of social development, the hierarchy of social and really personal development. She knew it was the right thing to do. And that's what I refer to as level D, doing the right thing, taking the initiative to do the right thing because you know it's the right thing to do. So she walked back to the cashier, that is to the nearest cashier, explained what she had done, and gave the cashier 10 cents. The cashier, of course, thanked her. And then as she wrote to me, she says, Marv, I cannot express to you how I felt doing the right thing simply because it was the right thing to do. Most of us live on a level that I call C, level C, cooperation. We need to live on this level in order to be a member of a successful democratic society. Let me just quickly share with you what the hierarchy is, because it is truly life-changing. Level A is anarchy. Level B is bullying. Level C is cooperating. And level D is democracy. So while we live our lives all the time on these various levels. For example, in anarchy, if you're ever angry at somebody, chances are you're not thinking about the other person. You're rather narcissistic. If you follow the rules of society, you're on level C. But what if you make your own rules? Like if you've ever gone over the speed limit, you've made your own rules of the road. That's level B. Level A and level B are inappropriate and not tolerated. However, the question is, how do you have kids or adults, anyone, move out of level A and B without coercion? And that's what my program does. So level C is external motivation. However, with kids, it's also how to have them do what's right because it's the right thing to do. The vast majority of young people like to be liked more than anything else. So, for example, there's a group of kids who smoke, and the other kid wants to smoke or wants to join the kids who smoke. The biggest factor with the young people is they want to be liked. Well, nobody of the group who smokes goes up to the young kid and say, "You want to join us? Here's a cigarette, smoke it." It doesn't work that way. This kid is going to start smoking to be liked by the other kids. And so he's going to start smoking. That's external motivation. So the critical point is, once young people can articulate the difference between doing it to please other people, to be liked, and doing it because it's the right thing to do, they have a mindset, they have a rubric to make decisions throughout their entire lives. It's critical to understand if you're doing it to please other people or because it's the right thing to do in a democratic society.
Wow, that's fascinating. Because I remember in your book you were talking about a husband helping a wife. One where the wife is very naggy. "Oh, come on, help me get in the stuff in the house. Come on, Billy." And he does it begrudgingly because he was kind of pushed into it, coerced. And then the other one, she comes home and the husband comes right out and helps her. And that's him doing it from inside, feeling like, this is a good thing to do. My wife is struggling. Let me go get the groceries. One, if I remember correctly, you said it really sticks and, of course, gives you less stress and you desire to do it. It's something not pushed, and it has a long-term effect of people doing it over and over again. Am I correct?
Let me give you a suggestion how to always stay in control. By way of 2 quick examples. You walk into a store and the salesperson says, "How are you today?" Isn't there a natural tendency to react?
Yeah.
Second situation, you're involved in a conversation with one other person. And all of a sudden, the second person who's listening asks you a question. Do you continue on a monologue or do you stop and answer the person's question?
You answer the question.
And here's the point to remember. The person who asks the question controls the conversation. So if you want to be in control, regardless of what the situation, you be the person who asks the question. So if somebody asks you a question, you turn it around. What do you think? What would happen if you did this? The fact of the matter is, we can control other people, but we cannot change them. People change themselves. And the most effective approach is not to use coercion, but to have a procedure. And the procedure is simply ask a question.
We'll be back after these messages.
Think back to when you started your business. You had a dream. You had boundless passion. You wanted to create something different. There was a problem, and you were going to solve it. Being an independent retailer is rewarding, but challenging, and there's a lot more to it than you ever imagined. Well, Lightspeed is here to help. With 45,000 customers around the world, we've helped countless entrepreneurs nail the business side of retail so they can spend time doing what they're passionate about. Join us for a 6-week speaker series featuring a curated panel of experts that will answer some of retail's toughest questions and give you the edge you need to stay competitive. You have a passion, and we have a passion for technology inspired by you. Visit lightspeedhq.com/speaker-series to learn more.
Such as, let's assume the wife is really angry, or it could be a kid, and anybody. Here's the question to ask. Are you angry at me or the situation? And what you have done is prompted the person to reflect. And it's the surest way to change a person, to have the person want to change. It is through this reflection process. And when you ask this question, you have literally redirected the person's thinking. And the response will be, well, I guess I'm just angry and I'm taking it out on you. Parents should never take anything that a kid says negatively. I don't love you anymore. The kid is frustrated. How do you change it?
Yeah.
The only way to change it, if you'd like me to share this with you, is to change what you think. Quick example to have this stick in your mind as an elementary principal for 7 years, one day the kindergarten teacher called, and she had a youngster who she was not successful in stopping crying. And so I reached into my bag of tricks, pulled out a stethoscope, went to the kindergarten room, saw the kid who was still crying, leaned or knelt down, looked at him eye to eye, put the ends of the stethoscope in my ear, or the ear parts, and then I put the end on his heart in 3 locations, and I proclaimed him healthy. He immediately stopped crying. Now, what did I do? I simply redirected his attention. The fact of the way the body and brain operate is you will see something, or you will hear something, or you'll think of something, and it automatically prompts a reflection or a feeling. First comes the cognition, then the feeling. You should never tell somebody you shouldn't feel that way. You can't stop the emotion. The only way that you can change an emotion is to change the thinking. So if you pivot, if you redirect your thinking, the emotion automatically follows. Don't try to change an emotion directly. Redirect your thinking, because emotion always follows cognition.
I love that. I love that. I recall many years ago, my Brian, my boyfriend, he was feeling sick, and I kept saying, "You're healthy. You're healthy." Because he said, he kept saying, "I'm sick. I'm sick." I said, "No, you're healthy." And then he's like, "I am healthy." But so I get what you say there, that you're focusing on where you want to be, and you're focusing on the positive, and not that where you are right now, stuck in the drudgery of I'm sick right now with the flu or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And to redirect the person's attention by the questions that you ask.
Awesome. Now, it seems like a really hard thing to do, because I've met people who kind of choose to stay in that kind of negative state. And really, I think the only thing you could do there is not help them by joining in kind of maybe the complaining bit. What would you say to someone, like, say it's your mom and she's always complaining about everything in life? It's just horrible. How do you keep her? Yeah, I guess redirection is one thing, but she just wants to just keep talking about the negative. What would you do in that case?
Let me give the answer by way of an example.
Great.
A friend of mine, a mother was in the hospital, and she wanted to go home, but she would not undergo any of the therapy that was offered to her. And so Darlene simply said, really asked, "Mom, what do you want to do?" And her mother says, "I want to go home." And then again, a question, "How are you going to do that?" And her mother said, "Well, I guess I better do the therapy." But she did, and she got home pretty rapidly. So again, it comes back to some simple ideas. You want to be in control, you ask the question, and that's a skill anybody can learn.
Yeah.
Like, if you wouldn't fail, what would you do? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your efforts? It is the reflection that the person will go through by the questions that you ask, because the key is asking reflective questions. And anybody can do it.
Yeah. And as far as someone not being there to be your mirror, perhaps, I found for me early on, I was a number of years ago having problems with finances. So I kept saying, "Oh, I'm broke, but I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to reduce my debts and stuff like that." And my friend said, "Well, you keep saying debt, which signifies that you're in the hole negatively, which is good to look at where you're at for fine. But recall that you constantly bring up the debts and being broke. So you're constantly reaffirming for yourself that's where you are. Maybe you want to, put forth that I'm really good with finances, and instead of saying debt and broke, use different language. Talk about how important language is in really changing your frame and your thoughts."
Well, you just gave a perfect example of it. If your self-talk was, "How can I get out of debt? What can I do?" Let me give you the opening paragraph of one of my books, the very first book I wrote. Life is a conversation. Interestingly, the most influential person we talk about all day is ourselves. And what we tell ourselves has a direct bearing on our performance, our influence, and our own effectiveness. Basically, our self-talk creates our reality. And it does. If we go through experiences, things we see, things that we hear, and we create our own filters. If a person is cognizant of their own self-talk, what they are saying to themselves, they have made the first step in changing any kind of negative behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The second point, by the way, if I can continue for a moment, is you always have a choice. You never have to be a victim. So what are some of the questions that you can ask yourself? And then the third one is to understand that if there's going to be any change on the other person, it's going to start with you by way of example.
Yeah.
You can control someone else, but you cannot change anybody. The only person you can change is yourself. And if you realize that, then the first question comes to mind is, well, what can I do? And I'm suggesting it's never going to be through coercion. You cannot coerce people into changing their minds. The way to do it is to have a combination whereby you are helping the person have the person help him or herself. And again, I'm going back to the same idea, the questions that you ask.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah. And I love that. And I recall for myself, not only asking better questions, more productive, positive-minded questions of where you want to end up, not where you are now, not focusing on if things are negative, if you're sick, or if you're in a bad situation, but focusing on where you want to be and looking for being a state of positive state of mind. What I found helped me, and you talked about this in your book, is visualization. How is it important to visualize where you want to be to eliminate stress? How does that work?
It works because of the way the body operates. Again, by way of an example, think of the last time you dreamt. Not that you remember your dream, but chances are you did not think in words. You didn't think in syllables. You thought in visions, in illusions, in pictures. That's how the human brain operates. We think in pictures. We remember in pictures. So if you say to a young kid, don't run down the hall, the kid is not going to remember don't. The last thing he remembers is run down the hall. That's not what you want the kid to do. So you always talk to people what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. The brain looks for novelty and imagine things just by the words we say. For example, for just a moment, think of any small pet except a white kitten with a red bow around its neck. Think of any color but blue. You see how the mind operates.
Yeah.
So you always want to talk to yourself and to other people of what you want them to do, never what you don't want them to do.
Yes. Yes. And your book also talks on thing that doesn't get touched a lot when it comes to stress, and that is how important sleep is and nurturing yourself, good nutrition and such, and laughter. I think we forget about that a lot, but sleep is a really big one for Americans, I think. I myself have a big problem with remembering to get into bed early enough so I get enough sleep. Why is that really a big proponent of stress?
Well, if you don't get enough sleep, you're depriving yourself of good health. Now, of course, it depends on your own anatomy. There are some people like the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, who doesn't require a lot of sleep. I knew a very close friend of mine who only required 3 to 4 hours sleep a night. However, most people need between 7 and 9 hours. Now, you can function with less than that. Of course, I did it for years and years. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm enjoying my sleep more. And I get about 8 hours sleep every night, and I function better that way.
Yeah.
However, you can also function with less hours sleep, as long as your body can attune to it. The 3 critical things I believe to live a long, healthy life is you've got to exercise your body. So many people today are undergoing stress that they don't even realize it because they're spending much of their time sitting or looking at a computer. Sitting is the new smoking.
Wow.
The body is made to move. So what I do, I have my computer on an elevated stand, which periodically I can lower. But every 15 minutes, I will move around. The body is made for movement. So it's some kind of exercise also. Number 2, good nutrition. People have said for years, you are what you eat. Let me give you a little philosophy about dieting. I don't believe in diets. And the reason why I don't believe in diets is as long as you feel you are on a diet, you automatically are going to focus on it And food becomes the realm that you're spending most of your thinking. How do you get away from that? Simple. Decide what you're going to eat, healthy food, when you go off the diet. And then that's what you eat. And then if you want to reduce your weight, that's exactly what you do. You decide what you're going to eat after the diet. So you don't have this problem of focusing on food all the time. And then the third thing, again, we talked about is sleep. Those are the three characteristics of good health. And of course, as I mentioned in the book, the introduction to the book, the actor, George Burns, the humorist, George Burns said, if you ask, because he lived to be 100, if you ask me what it would take to live this long, I'd say, don't stress. Stress affects everything about your body.
Yeah.
Including diseases which people get from stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the fact that not only eating well, but the diet, because there will be times where I say, okay, I need to take a review of what I'm eating, and because I'm not feeling quite well. So I decide, okay, from now on, I'm going to eat better. It doesn't, sometimes I don't stay on the wagon forever. I get off and have some pizza or garbage. But the point is, I just decide this is what I'm doing. And people are, oh, you're on a diet. Nope. This is a lifestyle. This is not a diet. I don't like the word diet. It's like a 4-letter word here.
Well, let me give you a recent experience I had. I developed a thing called rosacea. Perhaps best shown by W.C. Fields. If you remember the comedian W.C. Fields, he had red cheeks and a bulbous nose. That's the effect of rosacea. I have had wine for dinner for 50 years. And then when I no longer had a daytime job, I would have wine for lunch also. But what happened is the blood corpuscles over here start to turn red. And so if I drink red wine, for example, my cheeks will brighten up. Now, I have a very mild case of rosacea. Some people have horrible types of this disease, primarily spurred on by alcohol. I stopped drinking alcohol. On occasion, I'll have a little bit of champagne, but I no longer have red wine or any wine for dinner. Is it a sacrifice? No, it's not a sacrifice. Why is it not a sacrifice? Because my mind says to me, this is going to be in your own best interest. I mean, I smoked cigars for 35 years. I love them until I developed some kind of taste on my tongue got very, very sensitive. And I said, Marv, this is the first time, this is the first idea you're getting. You don't want to die of mouth or tongue disease as former President Grant did. So what you do is you play with yourself. So for example, again, regarding food, if I ever have any salad dressing, I do it at the very end, and I only use a very little salad dressing. I can taste lettuce because I'm not using any other thing on it. Your taste buds become sensitive. So let me repeat something I may have said also. When I ever autograph a book, I say, master your mind and enjoy. That's how you're going to enjoy life, if you master your mind, because you can. It takes a little effort, of course, but speaking about the book, it's all laid out in almost any category of life, how you can master your mind and reduce your stress.
It's great. It's incredible, Marv. Because I recall a number of years ago, I didn't like vegetables at all. I had a boss that said, go out and get me a salad every day. I was like, how could you eat this? This is a side thing. This isn't what you eat for a meal. And I tried it one day, and then I started getting her salads every day. I started getting me a salad, and I'm like, well, these veggies are pretty good. But it's really getting your mind used to, like, this is really pretty good. Getting your mind used to a whole new way of looking at things, perspective in the beginning of your book. So everyone, please go to get Marv's book today, Live Without Stress. And how can they go get your book and find out more about you?
The easiest way is to go to my website, withoutstress.com. Withoutstress.com. There's free information there on how to live more effectively and how to enjoy yourself more. There's information for teachers. There's information for parents. It's all free. If you want to see some of the products, then you go to the shop. But the website is withoutstress.com.
Wow, fabulous. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Marv, again for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Christina.